myself.
Hi. How are things going in the new realm world?
Things are going really well. I was just down in our new location in Charleston in South Carolina just a few short hours ago. And we are getting ready to open that location in just a couple of weeks.
That's very exciting. Are you guys kind of making the same beers, or is it like a different feel? Are you guys focusing on like certain other styles or anything in particular with Charleston?
I'm not sure right now, but I do think that each location is going to have quite a bit of autonomy in what they brew in their smaller systems. Still
Hmm.
keeping within like the New Realm brand, but not having to brew like exactly the same thing at each location. So probably a lot of
Hmm.
pilot batches.
Cool. How has like I haven't been to Charleston in many years. I went probably like 10, 15, maybe no, 10 years ago. And the beer scene just kind of seemed to be like bubbling up and like becoming a little bit more of a thing, like more craft breweries and stuff were kind of popping up. And it makes a lot of sense. Like there's plenty of activity for the younger folk, but like is the beer scene changing a lot in Charleston?
I get the impression that it is changing, but not as fast as it's changing in places like Atlanta. I
Hmm.
believe there's about 30 or so breweries in the Charleston area, but it's still very much a tourist destination. So it's
Hmm.
the identity of Charleston as a beer city, I don't think has quite gelled yet.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. Well, then you get to be a part of it, which is
Right.
extra exciting, right? You get to help
That's
meld it.
right. Exactly. Very
Yeah,
excited.
I love that. All right, so we're gonna get started in 3 minutes, right? So we're starting at 2:15 EST. I'm on the West Coast, so it's 11:15 for me. So it's just right on time to start drinking our first beer. Um, so for those of you who are already joined in, go ahead and open up your Sample Ox app. So if you haven't already, go ahead and download it. You can download it from any app store. It's called Sample Ox. This is the app that we're going to be using to do our tasting today. And Jen is going to be leading us through a guided tasting at the end. But I want to have your independent feedback and evaluation notes before we even talk about the beer. So go ahead and do your tasting now. Open up the app and put in the join code that's on the ticker on the bottom, VP2F6, and throw that in there and do your evaluation. It's pretty obvious. If you're evaluating Hoptropolis, select Hoptropolis. If you're evaluating Sierra Pale, then do that. And then we'll go over the results together. So that'll be kind of the fun part of the more interactive version of it. All right. So I'll probably say that one more time when we actually officially get started. So for those of you who are there, sorry, just go ahead and do the tasting now. It's always a fun thing. It's hard to kind of like throw everything into 1 hour. So I always try to get it done as quickly as possible, get the tasting
Right.
portion done so I'm not waiting for people. Did you do your tasting, Jen?
Not yet. I will while you're presenting, but I will be quick about it.
Great. Great. Yes, I'm sure you will. I did my tasting just before this.
Excellent.
And I'll do it again with you guys. Okay. So we'll get going in like about a minute or so. And I'm pumped. I'm excited to be here. I haven't done a conference in a while, and I feel like we're just now starting to like dial in virtual conferences right as the world's opening up. We've gotten really good at virtual. I wonder if we're going to be really bad at in person now.
Right. I know I, for one, am not happy about the fact that I won't be able to control the lighting around myself at all times. So maybe I'll just start carrying my ring light with me, even like at
Yeah,
in-person conferences.
you should totally be that weirdo who's just like, here's my your safety ring light.
Right.
I know I feel like I've just finally dialed in the lighting now, and
Right.
here we are, and I'm like, oh man, now I actually have to like leave it up to the professionals.
Right.
All right, so I guess I'll go ahead and get started. I like being on time, so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I'll introduce myself, and I'll kind of just like jump right into our talk for the day and our tasting at the end of this. So my name is Lindsay Barr. I am a co-founder and CSO of Draft Lab Sensory Software. I come from the world of craft beer. I've been in the world of craft beer for quite a few years. I cut my teeth at New Belgium Brewing Company, where I was the sensory and consumer research specialist there. I did that for about 10 years. And then branched off, and I've been in the wonderful world of sensory software and just helping to empower craft breweries and craft businesses of all kinds to use sensory to make everyday product and process decisions. So that's my passion and my excitement, and I'm excited to share it with you today. So thank you for having me in this DEI day. I'm going to talk about kind of kicking it off, diversifying our palate, talking about flavor, talking about how can we develop our palates together, and how can we use each other's experience to kind of build our own personal taste profile, if you will. And so the app that we're going to be using today to achieve this goal is SampleOx. SampleOx is our new engagement app out there, and it is intended to kind of help you do tastings, be joined with the experts, and be joined with your community to see what people are saying about the product, in hopes of kind of developing your palate and growing as you continue to do tastings. So hopefully you guys will have a good time. It's a good time. You'll see your name in the leaderboard if you register. So make sure that when you open up the app, go ahead and register with your name and do your tasting. So so that we don't take too much time doing the tasting at the end of this, open up your Hoptropolis. If you have it at home, let's start having a beer together. So open up your Hoptropolis or your Sierra Nevada Pale and begin your evaluation. I should never open beers while I'm doing this because it usually kind of foams out. So go ahead and open it up and use the join code in the SampleOx app, register, and do your tasting while I kind of get into this. And then at the end, we will look at each other's data together and kind of go over the results with our friend Jen Blair, who you just met, who's from New Realm Brewing. She is an expert on this beer. She's a sensory expert as well, and she's going to walk us through the flavor profile of Hoptropolis, and we'll have a good time along the way. So now I'm going to go and share my screen, and I just wanted to start by talking a little bit about sensory science as a whole, and how you can kind of use some tips and tricks to developing your palate. And here we go. All right. So like I said, go ahead and download SampleOx, register, open the Crafted for Action event. It should be either on the front page, it's searchable, or you can look at the join code BP2F6 and do your tasting. Okay. So like I said, I'm a sensory scientist. A lot of folks don't know what a sensory scientist is, and it makes a lot of sense. It's a little bit vague. So hopefully I'll give you an idea of what sensory is as a discipline. And spoiler alert, you're already doing it. You're already kind of a sensory scientist yourself, because you are using flavor to be able to make decisions based off of, your own tactile sensations, visual sensations, aroma sensations, taste, mouthfeel, touch. And you're able to make decisions based off of your own senses. And that's what we're all about in the sensory world, using that as a way of building our brands and continuing to make sure that they are of the highest quality and very consistent. And so the definition of sensory, I think, is a really useful thing to kind of start with. Sensory science is the scientific discipline where we aim to evoking a response from our people, from our panelists, measuring that response so that we can analyze that data and interpret the data to be able to make decisions about the foods and materials that we're producing. And we use our senses to be able to do this. And the senses are sight, hearing, touch, taste, and smell. And these are very relevant factors, especially when it comes to beer, because at the end of the day, we're selling a product to be consumed and enjoyed. And so it makes a lot of sense that sensory science would kind of be at the fore of that objective. So the role of sensory in the greater food and beverage world is to help us to inform recipe formulations. So we're trying to answer the question, what should we be making? And how are we going to be producing something that is going to be pleasurable for the people who are consuming it? So we're helping to formulate recipes, to detect product variability. Once you have a beer that you know that your is consumer ready, you need to make sure that you're doing that consistently. And especially in the craft beer world, we put a lot of emphasis on consistency. We want our products to be consistent year over year, batch over batch, season over season, shelf stable. And so it's important that we are able to measure any kind of variability. And then the third thing that we try to do in the craft food and beverage world is to inform process modifications. So if we find any kind of defects, or if we find any kind of abnormalities, or if we see that consumers aren't reacting favorably to our products, we'll need to modify that in a really pinpointed and targeted way. And so how do we do that? We use a group of tasters to be able to inform these decisions. And that's really the beauty of sensory science. You have everything that you need at your fingertips. You have everything that you need in your production facility to be able to do this right now and get value out of your sensory program. And they are human beings. They're the folks that are working in production. They are your patrons who are drinking your products. If it's just you as an individual, not necessarily in the production world, it's yourself. You're the taster that is most relevant to your decisions that you're making about the foods and beverages you consume. And so in the professional sensory world, these objectives are fueled by, again, a group of people, a group of trained tasters. And we're going to talk about that training mechanism that we use in the professional sensory world here in a minute, so that you can apply that to your everyday decisions. And so these tasters, they use their senses to help us to determine our flavor targets. So we use a common language to be able to pinpoint and develop recipes in a very targeted fashion. They are also trained and honed in, they've honed in their senses to be able to flag deviations, to be able to detect problems in the process, or maybe detect something that is not consistent with the target that you're going for in your recipe development. So those because they can flag deviations, they're able to flag product variability. And once product variability is flagged, you're then able to pinpoint issues in a more targeted way, so that you can modify your process. So if you were able to say, I'm going for something that's grassy, my panelists said that it wasn't grassy, they said that it was very low amount of grassy, we should be increasing the level of certain hops that maybe make a grassier aroma. So that's kind of the general process and the general mechanism for running sensory quality control in any kind of facility, and using tasters to be able to do that. And so we need a panel to do this. We want our products to reflect our consumers. And consumers in the beer world, consumers in really any food and beverage, they're a diverse group of people. And so we need a diverse group of people who are fueling our taste panels to be able to bring their various experiences to the table, so that we can learn from them and engage them in a way where their input is fueling the outcome of our products. And so what we're looking for when developing a panel in the professional beer setting is to get people from all over the place with different backgrounds, different cultural backgrounds, different familial backgrounds, because we experience different things based off of our environment. And, I was just working with a company in New Zealand, and we were smelling some hops, and I'm like, yeah, grassy, fruity, grapefruit. And they were using these esoteric fruit names that I had never heard of. I had never even I didn't experience these kinds of fruits growing up. And so they have this knowledge that is well beyond mine, because they have experienced different fruits. And so I'm hoping to learn from them. They bring their experience and their breadth of knowledge based off of their location and their experiences, and I can share mine. And so that's really powerful. A lot of sensory is really kind of focused on trying to get this kind of rigid machine-like panel, which I understand, but we really kind of have to start with a broader kind of perspective so that we can learn from each other and be able to integrate that feedback into our products that we're making. We also all have different strengths and different weaknesses. I know that I am not capable of smelling certain compounds, and that's just how it is. Everybody has some anosmia, so an inability to smell a certain compound, maybe taste something. And so we have these kind of gaps. We also, on the flip side, have these strengths as well. I know that I'm really sensitive to certain other chemicals where, the rest of the panel may not be. And so if we can kind of pool all of our resources and all of our internal human-like variability, we can create this instrument that is well-rounded and can direct our products in a really meaningful way. And that is the objective when we're building a sensory panel in the professional beer setting. And so a good training program really needs to build off of panel diversity while looking to align on established flavor concepts. If we're all willy-nilly and if we're not speaking the same language, it's kind of a bit of a non-starter. And so we have to start there, start with a diverse group of people, and then let's hone in on training our palates to be able to communicate more readily between within our panel and between panel and the rest of the organization and to our consumers. And so our training approach is pretty simple. Just develop the language of a product using standardized lexicons. And I'm going to show you a standardized lexicon that we built in 2016-ish for beer. So we're developing our language using these lexicons, which can make flavor analysis more approachable. If you've ever been given a blank sheet of paper and asked, go ahead and describe this product, you were probably like, what do you want me to do? And so you really need to kind of start with at least like broad flavor terms to help the user along. And so we're going to develop the language, and then we're going to calibrate using known flavor standards, and then also getting feedback either from the professional or from the panel themselves. So we are kind of always toggling between knowing the nature of the product and then testing ourselves and then being brought back into calibration. And then we share these results to access our new experiences. So when I was working with that company in New Zealand, they shared with me a different fruit that I had never experienced. And had I had the ability to smell it, it would have opened up and broadened my experience a little bit broader. And so a little bit more specifically, our training framework is to introduce known standards. So this is orange. And then test for recognition on blind samples, blindly smelling an orange, so you test that recognition, and then calibrate by revealing the nature of the sample. So I now tell you that was an orange, and you can go back and smell that. And also sharing your experiences. So having kind of a roundtable discussion when it's a more complex beverage like beer, and people can kind of share what it is that they're experiencing so that you can learn. So that's the calibration stage. And then we monitor our own performance or the performance of our panelists so that we can identify gaps, identify strengths, and then we repeat these steps when we have a better understanding of what our panelists' palate looks like. And so the result is the democratization of sensory. And that's really what our objective is at Draft Lab with Sampleox, is to really empower food and beverage businesses to be able to make informed product and process decisions from anywhere in the world. Whether you're a small maltster or a chocolate producer, you should be able to hone in on your senses and be able to access the information that you're already experiencing in a way that opens up the world of flavor so that you can really pinpoint what you're trying to make and find any kind of deviation. So that's what we're trying to do in the professional world. And, in the consumer world, what about me? In the consumer world, that's what we're trying to do with Sampleox. And that's what you guys are going to be experiencing today when you're doing your tasting. And so what we're really trying to do is to empower every person, to empower everybody to be able to use their senses to enhance their personal flavor experiences and therefore also the experiences of those around us. And so as you gain familiarity with the products, as you gain familiarity with these common lexicons and hear feedback from your peers and from producers, you should be able to hone in your beer sensory skills to become a better taster and make better decisions about the products that you maybe purchase or enjoy serve with your friends. And the framework is the same. So the same framework is applied in developing your consumer palate that we use when training professional tasters. Again, it's introducing known standards, which we're going to do today, test your recognition blindly when there is a source of the truth, and then calibrate based off of the feedback. You'll then be able to monitor your own performance and develop your palate from there and find the samples that will help you to achieve that goal. And so what we're going to do today, I need to go way faster, is learn a little bit more about our senses so that you can hone in on your senses and apply them to get more pleasure out of the foods and beverages you experience. And so the senses, I've already talked about them. These are the senses. You know them: sight, hearing, touch, taste, and smell. And this is the common lexicon that we start with beer. So the beer flavor map is the common lexicon that was produced in 2016. We came out with a second edition in 2017 once we got feedback from the industry. So this is a dynamic flavor language that changes as beer changes, and that's part of the beautiful thing. So this should give you a good understanding of where to start from. And this language is integrated into SampleOx, and you will be able to use it for your flavor evaluations. And so the first thing that you do when you pick up a beer is you look at the visual characteristics. And the visual characteristics really is like your first line of defense when you're making a flavor judgment. If something looks moldy, you're maybe not going to put it in your mouth. If it looks dark and you wanted something nutty and roasty, then maybe you're going to go ahead and go for it. But it's also a source of unintentional bias. So if we see something that's dark in color, we might be more inclined to say that it's going to be nutty when it may not, in fact, be nutty. And sometimes we therefore blind our samples in the professional world. It's not necessary now. And it's also an important piece of the quality and consistency of our product. If we're trying to make a hazy IPA and it's not hazy, that kind of means that we maybe didn't hit our target. And so what we're looking for when we're looking at the visual characteristics of beer is the color, the clarity, the foam, the lacing, and the haze and particulate. So the color is just, color. Clarity is any kind of haze or particulate in there. And then foam and lacing. Lacing is kind of the cling to the side of the glass. So those are the characteristics that we look for in our beers. So now let's talk a little bit about mouthfeel. This is the mouthfeel section of the beer flavor map, and we broke it out into body, irritation, afterfeel, and effervescence. And so mouthfeel is really important. It has a direct impact on the acceptability of our foods or beverages that we drink. So you would reject a flat beer or maybe a cold coffee if you weren't expecting it to be cold. So it does have a direct impact on what it is we're experiencing. And we have two ways of perceiving mouthfeel. One is physically induced, so that's kinesthetic reactions, and the other is chemically induced, and those are chemogenic reactions. So when you think about kinesthetic, kinesis, you're kind of thinking of your body in space or your tongue in the matrix of the beer. These are the tactile sensations, and it helps you to understand the body or the weight of the sample. And then there's chemogenic reactions, and as the name suggests, this is any kind of chemically induced reaction that you get through your trigeminal nerve in your mouth. So carbonation plays that role. Carbonation tingle is like the pain sensation that you get from CO2 molecule. Menthol or capsaicin literally cools your tongue or literally heats your tongue. It opens the same ion channels that you would open in your tongue as if you were to be putting an ice cube on your tongue. So it cools and it heats your mouth, and these are chemically induced, menthol and capsaicin. Alcohol also helps to heat your mouth. Metallic sensations kind of give that irritation, and astringency. That's like the literal mouth drying effects that beers and many wines have as well. And so some tricks to honing in on your mouthfeel sensations is to move your tongue really slowly through the liquid when you put the beer in your mouth to perceive the weight, to perceive the body. Then maybe suck your tongue a little bit to perceive astringency. And it kind of makes your your tongue feel a little bit sandpapery, and that's astringency. And if you want to use mouthfeel for fun in beer and food pairings, you can enhance spice perception by actually pairing highly hot beers, so like alcohol, boozy beers with spicy food to enhance it. If you wanted to diminish spice perception, then maybe cool spicy foods with like mint, or something that actually opens those same ion channels. So like minty aromas will help do that. Or coating mouthfeels by cleansing your palate from fatty foods with hoppy beers. Because they're astringent, they'll help to actually grab proteins out of solution, and you can literally kind of like wipe your tongue clean with hoppy beers when you're eating fatty foods. So those are some kind of tricks that you can take to the bank. The aroma section of the beer flavor map is probably the most complex, and it's hopefully broad enough to be able to encompass most of what you would experience in a product. And aroma is relatively complicated. We actually smell in two different ways. We smell orthonasally. So if you just take a whiff of your beer, break out some of the volatiles and take a whiff, that's orthonasal olfaction. And then we also smell in reverse, retronasally. So if you take a sip of your beer, let it warm up on your tongue, and then breathe back through your nose, you're experiencing aroma again. That's retronasal olfaction. And, the amount of aromas that you can experience are practically limitless. It's not like a lock and key mechanism. All these chemicals can bind to different receptors. Receptors can bind to different chemicals. And then that's not even anything. We haven't even said anything about all the synergistic effects that you get with all of the various chemicals that you could experience in beer working together. And so aroma is incredibly complex, and it's very exciting. And aroma language is very difficult. It's difficult to understand. It's difficult to achieve. And it makes a lot of sense. We prefer blended tastes. We don't just, only eat geraniol aroma. And so that's what we're experiencing. We like blended tastes. And most of us really haven't moved from the subjective to the objective. We haven't tried to hone in on our sensory skills in that kind of way. And we're also very good at associating emotions with aromas. If you've ever had the experience where you've walked into somebody's house and you've been reminded of like your grandmother or something, that's a quick, very fast reaction that happens. It is actually because of the proximity of your olfactory bulb and the memory centers of your brain. You are able to very quickly detect an aroma and attach it to a memory. But it's way harder to attach it to the language centers of your brain. And so that takes a little bit of training, that takes a little bit of practice, and that's what we're here to do. So some tricks with honing in on your aroma sensation is to breathe out of your nose to heighten that sensation of that retronasal olfaction. And then start with the emotion. So when you start with like, oh, this makes me feel X, or this brings me back to my grandmother's house. Well, what is it about grandmother's house? Is it the potpourri? So is it floral? Is it geraniol? Is it like the stale mothball? Like what is it that reminds you of that? So you just need to go 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps deeper to really hone in on what you're experiencing. But starting with that emotion is just a fine thing to do. And then you can use tools to help identify those specific aroma sensations. Tools like the beer flavor map that help you to see, okay, fruity. I can understand fruity. What kind of fruit? Oh, it's like a citrus fruit. Oh, it's like a grapefruit. And so use these tools to kind of build these memory aids to kind of build those connections. And then when pairing, one of the fun kind of pairing tricks with aroma is enhancing sweetness by adding something like vanilla. This is an example of a cross-modal interaction where our association with vanilla, at least as Americans, is with sweetness. It's with candies or cupcakes or cookies. And so you can actually enhance the sweet perception by adding aromas that tend to be paired with sweet things. All right, so now let's talk about taste. Taste is just this tiny little section of the beer flavor map, but that doesn't mean that it's less important. So how do we taste? When we put something on our tongue, the food dissolves into our papillae, and these papillae have multiple taste buds. What you're actually seeing is papillae. When you stick out your tongue and see all those little grooves, you can see those. And a lot of times in a lot of those papillae, there are hundreds of taste buds, and they're all over your tongue. In fact, they're all over like through your throat. Recently, scientists have noted that there are taste buds in your stomach. So it's kind of cool. It's crazy stuff. Anyway, so a chemical change is induced and signals get sent to your brain, and you register it as a unique or a different taste, as sweetness, bitterness, saltiness, that kind of thing. So if you're wondering if you're a taste, you have to fulfill certain criteria to be a taste. You have to be a unique class of stimuli, so sweetness for sugars, or sugars for sweetness, certain sugars. And then you also have to have receptors for that certain class of stimuli on your taste bud cell. So that has to be, you have to have a mechanism for binding sugars and registering them as sweetness. So you have to have a specific taste processing pathway to your brain, and then a perception that is independent of other taste qualities. So if a sugar molecule and another sugar molecule have the same perception, it's not two different sweetnesses, it's just sweetness, if that makes sense. I don't think I've ever said that before. And so when you're describing a taste, if you want to be nerdy about it, if you're about to use the preposition like, it's probably the case that you are about to say an aroma. So if this tastes like chocolate, then you're probably about to list an aroma. But if you're saying this tastes sweet, you're probably going to list a taste. Tastes are only sweet, salty, sour, bitter, umami, fatty, maybe metallic. Those are the only sweetnesses, or sorry, those are the only tastes that are recognized as tastes currently. There are more out there, I'm sure. And so a trick to just only talk about taste is to like plug your nose and experience taste without the aroma interaction, so that you can just experience sweetness and bitterness. All you have to do is put the beer on your tongue, plug your nose, and you're only tasting. Some pairing tricks: you can diminish bitterness by adding salt. Like an IPA and potato chips are a classic pairing, and it's because those two things actually interact with each other to diminish the bitterness. You can actually block sour receptors with a thing called miracle fruit as well. You can buy it on Amazon, and you can literally block your sour receptors, and it makes everything taste sweet. It's temporary, and it's kind of fun if you're feeling like it. All right, I'm going to leave plenty of time for our tasting and for questions as well. I've been able to kind of be a part of some of the lectures yesterday, and there's plenty. It seems like there's plenty of interaction, and I'm hoping that we're getting interaction too from you guys. If not, then throw some questions into the chat, and I would love to have more of a conversation with y'all about sensory and about your own flavor perception. So to kind of conclude, developing your palate, there's nothing like knowledge by acquaintance, and knowledge by acquaintance is greater than knowledge about something. So I can hear about this fruit in New Zealand, but if I don't taste it, then I'm not going to really have a deep understanding of what it is. And so what we're trying to do is build that acquaintance knowledge by tasting together. So start early. If you have kids, get your kids on tasting, get them describing their yogurt by not just saying yummy, yucky. Have them talk about the lactic profile or the citric profile of their yogurt. Be nerdy and try to get yourself and those around you to better hone in on their senses and pay attention, smell the roses, as it were. If you're walking around and you smell something, get curious and kind of dive into it a little bit more. And then we can build these subconscious connections by just kind of continuing to do that. Also break it up. I talked about visual, aroma, ortho and retronasal olfaction, taste, and mouthfeel. So break it up and really kind of focus on those individual sensory modalities when you're trying to hone in on your sensory skills. And then get some help with a common lexicon. So when you're first starting, it's really important to kind of get a little bit of guidance just to help you hone in on your experience. And then collaborate with your people, with your peers, and with the experts in the industry, and get their feedback, get your feedback. And one of the best things that we can do for each other is not be so snooty about our product, and just make it safe and inviting to talk about what our experiences are, and have that be kind of an open forum for us to kind of educate one another on the flavors that we're experiencing. You can always learn something from your peers and from the experts as well. And then practice a lot. That means, in our case, drinking beer, which is great. So practice and have fun with it. Don't take this too seriously. Once you're not having fun, then why are you doing it? So these are kind of the bullet points for developing your palate. And so now I kind of want to get into our tasting. So if you haven't already, go ahead and open your beers if you haven't, and do your flavor analysis on your beers, and you will be able to see your results in Sample-Ox. We will keep this open. If you're watching this later, we will also keep this open. So if you want to taste Hoptropolis or Sierra Pale at some other time, I'll keep this open for a few more days, probably about a week, and you can actually see the leaderboard, see how you're doing. So go ahead and open your beers, do your evaluation, and Jen and I will talk a little bit about Hoptropolis and hear what she has to say about her flavor notes, being the expert in the New Realm Beers world. So Jen, tell me about this beer. What are kind of the main sensory characteristics that you get in your aroma sensation?
So thank you for inviting me on to be able to talk about this and about Hoptropolis. And I'm always extremely honored to be able to share a screen with Lindsay. And she's been formative in me deciding to pursue sensory. So with all of that kind of acceptance speech things aside, I will answer the question that you asked, which is with Hoptropolis, it is one of our IPAs, is one of our core brands. It is more of a tropical IPA is typically how we describe it. And that most of that tropical flavor is going to come from the hop aroma in it. So when I'm smelling Hoptropolis, some things that I get right away are a lot of pineapple, grapefruit, some orange, specifically like navel orange, going to the specificity of what it is that I'm tasting. Every once in a while, depending on the day, I might even get a little bit of like a light vanilla note. I didn't get that today. This just depends on the day, I guess. And I also get some mango and just a little bit of pine.
Yeah, nice. Sounds delicious. I wish I wasn't on the West Coast and I could.
Right, I wish I would have thought to send you some.
It's fine. We can figure that all out later.
Right, we'll just have to come to
So what are some ways that you personally use what are some applications that you kind of apply in developing your own palate? I know that you've, studied for, Cicerone, and that you've, been in the sensory world for some time. So how do you what are some of your bullet points and takeaways from training your palate?
For training your palate, I 100% everything that you said. I think I probably say that because I learned it from you. One other thing that I think is really instrumental, and it has been for me, is doing beer judging. And that is, it's very beneficial for your local beer community to help them out for doing a sensory evaluation of their beers. But every single time I sit down to judge beer and judging beer, filling out a score sheet, looking at style guidelines and thinking critically about what I'm tasting. And does it taste like what the style is supposed to taste like? And if no, why not? That has been like the absolute best practice for me, because you're just thinking very critically about the beer in regards to what how well it fits within that style.
Yeah, right. And then being able to kind of get that almost immediate feedback around, what other judges are saying at the table. That's probably one of the things that I appreciate most about judging, is the receptive and open environment. And whenever I write recommendations for judges, that's the main thing that I think about, is like how are they going to be interacting with other judges, and are they going to be open to listening to what other people have to say about this product? And that's probably one of the most important things to bring to the table.
Definitely. And that's one of the things I think is very surprising to people the first time that they judge, is that they know what they're talking about. We're the best judges of what we're tasting, and it's really just through practice that you learn how to put it into that common lexicon. And it is incredibly validating when you're judging and the person across the table says, yes, I got that too, or yeah, I picked up on that. What was that? and having those kinds of conversations. And, if you pick up on something and your judge is like, I'm not actually familiar with that flavor, then you have a conversation about that. And, again, that goes towards every time I judge, I learn something new from, about my palate, about a beer style, and almost always from the other people I'm judging with.
Right. Yeah. And how do you apply kind of your senses, your like perception in like your everyday life? Like, do you often nerd out like I do with your food pairings and stuff, or do you kind of just like turn it off when you leave the office?
It depends, but before I really started down the road of developing my palate, I was a little hesitant about whether I wanted to or not, because I was really worried I was going to lose my ability to just like drink a damn beer, sometimes just like sit outside somewhere and have a beer and enjoy it. And that hasn't been the case, but sometimes it still kicks in when I'm wanting to enjoy a beer and, and then discover that the beer is not what I thought. But yeah, I try to apply it in food pairings and thinking through it, because that's another challenge of developing your palate, is that your brain can make the connections for you, and then walking backwards and saying, okay, but why specifically did I arrive at this decision? So I definitely do that, and will, I've gotten pretty good at like just a little discreet swirl and sniff when I'm out someplace, so I don't look like a complete jerk.
But you don't want to be that guy.
Exactly. So you definitely like pick up on being quick with that. But yeah, it's also a skill to learn how to turn it off. And I've been plenty of places where somebody will say, "Oh, here, smell this or taste this and tell me what's wrong with it." And if you're not in the zone, it's like, it's perfectly fine. And I had a local brewery who's had one of their flagship beers I absolutely love. If I see it out somewhere, I will order it. Twice I have judged it in a competition and just like raked it over the coals. And I've had somebody say like, "I thought you really liked that beer." And I said, "I do." And they're like, "No, you don't. I saw your score sheet." But that's just a test to when you're outside of a kind of that evaluation environment and you're just enjoying a beer, you're enjoying all of the things that come with that beer, and not always just trying to pick it apart.
Right. Yeah. I always kind of ask like, do you want my opinion, or like, and the funny thing that I always used to say is like, I've said a lot of things, but I was going to say like those who can't do teach. But I feel like I've gotten pretty good at flavor analysis, mostly just because like I have a lot of experience doing this, like teaching and talking about it. But really when it comes down to it, like my opinion is no better than the person who's making it. And what we really try to do with Draft Lab is to empower producers to be able to make those decisions themselves and never put anybody else kind of like on this pedestal. And when I worked for New Belgium, I didn't want to ever be like the final decision maker. And in fact, like I kind of completely took myself out of the decision making process, because my palate was kind of irrelevant. It was all about what the panel is saying, and there's no real hierarchy when it comes to just kind of tasting and getting flavor notes. One of the things that I've kind of been thinking about too with like the consumer world, or for those who are on this call that are maybe not in the industry or looking to get into the industry, or curious about flavor or whatnot, how sensory can be kind of empowering in this way, where you've been able to give yourself some language to be able to describe your experience. And it can be empowering in these kind of minuscule ways where, in the cartoon that I used in my slide deck, to give us the language when we're trying to purchase something, when we're trying to buy the right beer. For example, I've learned never to say the word like earthy when buying wine, because I always get this like Brett bomb and I hate it and it's not that fun for me. So when you can kind of give yourself the language, you can inform purchasing decisions, but it can also open up opportunities within hospitality. if we are able to kind of bridge that gap between the consumer's perception and the producer's product development, we can kind of like really empower ourselves as a person who is easily employable within like a hospitality world or within a brewing world. And so how do you kind of see that manifest like in the tap room at New Realm? How do you guys kind of work to bridge the gap between what your consumers are saying and asking for and what you know about the product, so that you can create for them a unique experience and one that you're pretty sure that they're going to enjoy?
So one of the biggest things I do in my role at New Realm when teaching internally about our beer is stressing the importance of making beer fun and approachable and making it a really great experience for people, which means, being respectful, asking questions, not talking down to somebody, not telling somebody what, just saying, well, you'll probably just want this, but really creating that experience. Because I've spoken with people who will tell me their favorite craft beer is, usually it's like a one-off kind of esoteric beer that somebody did as a specialty a few years ago. But what they tell me the most about is that, sitting at the bar and having the bartender talk to them and ask them questions and, help lead them to trying this beer. So that is definitely getting that, empowering our employees to have those kinds of conversations with the customer, and then in return, empowering the customer to say, it is, especially with something like tasting, like you said, it's not a scary thing, but, and once you understand like what sensory means, you understand that you do it all the time, but you are very vulnerable when you're talking to somebody and you don't quite have the correct words for it. So creating kind of that back and forth of a learning experience for the bartender and the customer is something that's really important for me to make sure that our employees are doing. And then the other things we do, just kind of the, less, I guess, feelings version of it is I frequently do surveys for customers if we're doing things like rolling out new flavors of hard seltzers, or we just recently released canned cocktails. And, figuring out, asking for customer feedback on, do you like this, version A or version B better, and why? And having those kinds of conversations to say, what do you expect as a customer for, a Paloma to taste like? Or what kinds of hard seltzer flavors would you like to see? What flavors do you not see that you would like to see? And getting that feedback too through, more through just a mobile survey. So people can also be a little bit more honest. I'm not standing there with a clipboard and like the white coat or anything asking these questions, but frequently asking our customers what it is that they would like to see. And then the last kind of my bigger project for doing this, actually also inspired by listening to one of your presentations, is looking at things like Untapped, and are the descriptions that our customers are giving us, do those match with what our marketing language says? And if it doesn't, if we say that Hoptropolis has a really big papaya nose and we ask 100 people and nobody says papaya, then we probably need to take papaya out of that description.
Yep. Yeah, we got to speak their language.
Yeah.
All right, I want to move to questions, but first I want to go through what people were saying about Hoptropolis. And if you guys haven't done your tasting, and if you want to do it later, go ahead and do it later, and you'll be able to kind of see how you stack up to Jen's tasting notes. Her tasting notes are in there. You'll be able to see that denoted by verified attributes. Those are the attributes that she agrees with you on. But people are agreeing with you that there's like mango, kind of like a lot of fruity aromas. So I see a lot of grapefruit as well. Low bitterness, lots of fruit is what people are saying for the many a fruit. So it sounds delicious. So low bitterness, kind of like low alcohol burn, like not much of that, medium-ish body, medium carbonation, and not very drying. So it's on the more kind of juicy, effervescent side, with a decent amount of like mango and grapefruit and those kinds of aromas. So So, oh, and pine. So some people also say pine. So feel free to go in there and do your tasting and see how you stack up to Jen, see how you stack up to the rest of the competition, and you will get a score that is consistent with your proximity to Jen's evaluation. So with that, I want to go ahead and move it over to questions to make sure that we get enough time for that. So I'll go ahead and read this one. Bree G, what's up, Bree? It's fine for being late. But what are your thoughts on sipping beer while completing the aroma portion of a sensory panel? I've seen so much contradicting information. So I think what you're asking is kind of the difference between aroma and taste, and how do we break that up? My philosophy is, and you're probably also talking about aroma, orthonasal and retronasal. You can only get so many aromas when you're smelling, because if you think about what's going on in the headspace of your beer, you're just breaking out whatever is volatile. So whatever can break out of that solution and can be smelled through your nose. But aroma works another way too, and you have to take a sip in order for you to do retronasal olfaction. So to take a sip, and then you breathe back out of your nose, you're doing retronasal olfaction. And that's where you start getting those bigger molecules that aren't as volatile, that are in the solution, that are like, now I get way more caramel and more kind of like nutty, malty aromas. Whereas before I was getting those kind of more subtle, fruity aromas as well, like the esters and that kind of thing. So in order to we break out aroma, and then we break out taste, and taste is really just the basic taste. So sweet, salty, sour, bitter, umami, and aroma is, basically everything else. So not only is it okay to sip when you're doing your aroma portion, but it's imperative that you do sip. Not that I have an opinion on this, because you want to get the full aroma profile of the product. Do you have anything to add to that, Jen?
No, I completely agree with that.
Cool. All right. What's our next question? How do you develop your palate for beers you don't always care for? For example, IPAs taste like flower bombs, but I know they can be amazing. Do you want to take that one, Jen?
Yeah, I can. I would say that, for me, particularly in the realm of beer judging, I have had to judge a lot of beer styles that I don't particularly care for. And in a lot of ways, I feel like that makes you almost more objective, because I know some people who always want to judge IPAs because IPAs are their favorite. And I don't know that that's you're always approaching it with as objective as a viewpoint as you can. So with something specifically like IPAs, let's say, and this is, and I won't turn this into a commercial for our IPAs at New Realm, but Hoptropolis was developed to be a kind of a happy medium between our Hazy Like a Fox, which is a New England style IPA, and our Hoplandia, which is very much a classic West Coast American IPA. And there's a lot of range between those three. So when you're developing a palate for beers you don't care for, I would, dig into things like they taste like flower bombs, and, kind of pull that apart and see what specifically it is that you don't like about that, and back into, okay, is that a specific hop that maybe I just don't like the profile of it? Is it a combination of hops? And then, becoming more of an empowered customer when you're going to buy your IPAs and looking on the label to see if the hops that you don't like, are listed on there, not to go for that one. That's for me always one of the fun things too. If you smell or taste something and you can't really think of what it is, or you're wondering why you have an association with it, is just, Googling it and looking up like what kind of hops have floral characteristics, and then kind of going backwards from there and reverse engineering your way into what it is specifically you don't like about it.
Yep. And knowing what you don't like can be just as empowering as knowing what you do like. Knowing like I I'm never going to say the word earthy when ordering wine because I don't like bread characteristics is empowering for me as a consumer. And when it comes to me as a trained taster, the liking thing is kind of like irrelevant. Like, we're lucky that we work in an industry where we can like our products. We're not making cat food. But a lot of sensory scientists do work in the realms of cat food. And liking is not even part of it. Like, you have to be just only objective. But as a consumer, it can be really helpful to even know, okay, well, I don't like what you were saying, I don't like these flower bombs. I don't like really highly floral beers. And so I'm going to seek out something that is a little bit more on the fruity side. And so that also kind of helps you make better decisions about what you're going to be purchasing and pairing. Do we have any others? Nice. Jen, I always find sours difficult to pair with food. What are some of your go-to pairings for sour beers? For sour beers, I do find them to be harder too, but I kind of like taking sour beers and doing pairing them with sweet things. I think like sourness and sweetness tend to go relatively well together. I can't really tell you exactly scientifically why that is. But I know that different sourness is going to be perceived a little bit differently too. And so when you have something that's like very highly citric, that kind of biting thing, you might not want to pair it with something that is equally citric. So equally, you wouldn't want to pair it with like a salad with like citrus fruit on it, with like a miniola or something like that. So you would maybe want to contrast it. I think like the contrast portion of like the pairing objectives is probably best when it comes to sours. That being said, I'm not a pairing expert. This is just kind of like my thoughts. So I kind of like contrasting it with sweetness and with kind of more like body, like chocolate cakes or something. How about you, Jen? Do you have any sour beer pairing ideas?
Yeah, I agree with that. And one of the other things I will look to if I've got a sour beer and like say something specifically that's been kettled sour that has that kind of lactic acid kind of spritziness to it. Anywhere where you would want something like like a squeeze of lemon or lime on the dish, I think that the beer can stand in for that and bring that acidity to the dish. But I do agree with you that if I have a salad with some sort of a citrus vinaigrette on it, I probably wouldn't add a sour to that. But if it was a really fresh salad, then I may, with some other kind of dressing, then I may pair it with that sour to bring that kind of citrus, just that spritziness to it. Yeah, and then I think anything like a Flanders red ale, something like a beef dish or a stew, anything where you would pair a red wine with it is going to make a great pairing for a Flanders red.
Yeah, that makes sense. Nice bar behind you, Lindsay. Thanks. Do you create beer cocktails? I haven't gone deep into the world of beer cocktails. I just went on a Mai Tai project that kind of like took my attention for a couple of weekends. Making the orgeat and doing that whole thing. I kind of nerded out about it. So I haven't really done a lot of the beer cocktails, but I'll let you know when I do. I'll like post something on our Instagram or something. But my go-to is generally a Manhattan. And these days I've just been really honing in on my tiki drinks. All right. Any advice for new beer drinkers on finding a style? Yeah, I mean, for those who are new to the category, there's nothing like just grabbing a taster flight from somewhere and just like asking to really try all of it. And a lot of times generally a lot of folks say like start relatively light, like go with light lager or whatever. But a lot of people don't really like light lager, like and they just kind of go straight for IPA, or straight for amber ales or something like that. And so I would just probably ask for a flight and just kind of note the flavors that you're enjoying and notice if you like them. You can use tools like Samplex to be able to do that as well and have a repository of all of the info that you have that you've tasted. So I kind of would just start there. But what's great about beer, what's great about food and palate development is our preferences change over time too. And so what you might like one day may be a little bit different the next. Yeah. What do you think, Jen?
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think exploring styles is one of the most fun things about being a beer person and exploring interpretations of styles. So if I'm at a brewery, there are a few styles that you just don't see very often that if I see it on your menu, I will order it every time. But also I've gone into breweries before and say like, what is the beer that I need to try? What do you think is the best showcase of your brewery? And it's usually a beer that I wouldn't necessarily order. I tend to go for very classic beer styles. And I recently was at a brewery and ordered something that had been, I think, aged on grapes and all these other things that I just don't normally order it. And it was phenomenal. And I was really happy that I had ordered it. So I think if you see something that piques your interest, trying it. And I love the idea of just getting a taster and being able to try everything and exactly just paying attention to what you don't like and also what you do like. And then, funneling that into exploring what those flavors are, like where do they come from? Is it malt? Do you like more malt forward beers? Do you dislike the acidity or something like that? But yeah, I definitely agree about the light lager. I have had to convince many people that what they think beer tastes like doesn't have to just taste like that. And I'll just say, just forget, like, get the idea of beer, of like your like college parties beer out of your mind. Really, just really forget about it and just drink this liquid in front of you and tell me if you like it or not.
I like it. So Jen, you're starting your virtual BJCP classes soon. Is it too late to register or participate?
No, it is not. We just had our first class kickoff this past Monday. If you are listening to this and you're interested, you can go to underthegenfluence.beer and see the sign up there for the judge training. Totally free, and we meet weekly, but all of the resources, all of the presentations are also available on the website too. So that way, if you can't attend one of them, you're still able to get that information. So yes, definitely, if you're interested in learning more about developing your palate, like I said, the beer judging is phenomenal. To a phenomenal way to do that. So if you're interested in that, then I would definitely welcome anybody who'd like to sign up. Thank you for asking about that.
Nice plug. All right, I think we're pretty much out of time, so I'll go ahead and do my own plug. So yeah, you guys, quite a few of you guys did the sample ox tasting. You'll be able to hear or see your results at the end of that. We're going to be doing a bunch of kind of like live, in-person, virtual events as well throughout the summer. So make sure that you follow us on our social channels. We're at sample ox, at sample_ox, and Draft Lab if you want to be really nerdy. That's kind of our more professional beer handle. And we have been putting out a ton of content over the last couple of months through our YouTube channel. So check out the Draft Lab YouTube channel. That's DRAUGHT Lab YouTube channel. And subscribe and be in the know with what we're up to. We're always doing fun, nerdy stuff. So thank you so much for having me, Jen. Thank you for joining and talking about the beer and having a conversation about sensory with me. Yeah. And
There we go.
I froze. Anyway, I froze, but I froze right on the right time and with a terrible face. Anyway, good to see you guys. I'm out of here. Find me at draftlab.com. See y'all.
Bye. Thank you.